Calling now the next panel members, Rachael Mwikali, Pussy Power. Penda Mbow from Senegal, Citizens Movement, Penda. Welcome on stage. Merci. Bonjour Penda. Marema Toure, Association de femmes africaines. Marema Toure? Oh, right, okay. That's the Association of African Women for Research and Development-Senegal in CODESRIA. So welcome on stage, Marema. Right.
And my dear brother, McDonald Lewanika, who is going to be moderating this session. The session will focus on strengthening agency and building people power. McDonald.
Donc, bonne séance.
I wish you fruitful deliberations.
Panel, c'est parti.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. That is much better. That is much better. You know, in my other life, I pretend to be a scientist, and I work with observations. And the observation that I would have reached from your week, good morning, would have been that the hosts have not fed you, which is inaccurate. So I'm glad that we've been able to correct that. My name is Lewanika McDonald, and I have the distinct pleasure of moderating this session on strengthening agency and building people power. And I'm glad that the keynote speaker, Jerry, has laid a solid foundation for us for this conversation, and I'm hoping that my panelists will be able to reflect on some of the things that he has placed on the table, some of the conversations that we had yesterday. And I encourage those who are coming from the academic conference to also contribute any insights around this particular question that may have occurred during the conversations that took place in Dakar. In a lot of respects, this panel is one that allows us to allow for something that we're trying to do at this conference, which is a meeting between theory and practice. We have people who have studied, we have professors, doctors, and we've got practitioners who operate on the ground on this panel, just as we have in the room. So I'm hoping that these different perspectives that we have can be able to contribute meaningfully to the conversation without devaluing, undermining, overvaluing each other's perceptions, because as we learned yesterday from the keynote, sometimes we can see things differently, not necessarily because they are different, but because it is a matter of perspectives, right? Crops do not need rain, they need water. But someone else may say, no, they need rain and stuff like that. So it's a matter of perspective, and I'm hoping that the richness of our different vantage points will contribute to this conversation. I have the unique disadvantage of being the only male on the panel, which I think is a good thing. And I am also the only one who is not a polyglot on the panel. Everyone else can speak English and French, except for myself. So I encourage my panelists to speak in the language that they are comfortable with, and then you can decide which channel you are listening in on. Just to set the stage for the conversation, I just want to reflect on a few things, starting with something that our moderators encouraged us to do yesterday. That sometimes we make a lot of assumptions around some of the things that we'll be talking about, or some of the jargon that we have at our table. And sometimes we assume that some things are not jargon when they are. We assume that there's a shared understanding of what those things are, yet the understanding may not necessarily be shared. This topic, strengthening agency and building people power, is one such theme. Do we have a shared understanding of what agency is? Do we have a shared understanding of what people power is? Do we believe that agency is inherent, as Jerry was making? If it is inherent, why is it that we don't see it popping up every now and then? If it is inherent and it is there, why does it need to be strengthened? If it is inherent, why does it need to be built? If, as people, we have the power, and often the slogan is "Amandla ngawethu," the power is ours. If it is already there, then why is it that we need to build it? I'm hoping that we can be able to leave this conversation with not necessarily a uniform understanding of these things, but at least a benefit from the different perspectives around how we can be able to approach these different components of the topic that we are having. I will respect my audience and not necessarily go into definitions around what agency is and what people power may or may not be. But I'm hoping that part of this conversation will be about how, if it is inherent, we can be able to activate that agency where it is inactive. We can be able to accept the reality that our agency, whether it's inherent or built or constructed, that it does not exist in a vacuum, that there are a lot of challenges in our midst as societies. And in order for us to manifest people's agency, we need to deal with those impediments. Amongst those are issues around civic space, which we started having a conversation about yesterday, and hopefully we can be able to continue. I may, or we may have agency, but if at the end of the day, the environment does not allow me to exercise my agency, what can we be able to do? How do we claw back on those things that are trying to stifle the realization of our impact and action as ordinary people? When we talk about people power, and we are the people, we know that we are basically talking about our power. But in civil society circles, in philanthropy, sometimes there is a tendency to pick and choose who are the people. Who are the people? Can we be able to distill that further? Are we talking about people as the same as citizens? Are we talking about people as, I usually laugh where I come from, because as you can see, I'm a fairly rich man with a big stomach. So I stay in a fairly decent neighborhood. And when people start talking about mobilizing the people, half the time they're not talking about mobilizing people where I live. Am I not people? So who is it that we are talking about giving power to when we talk about the people? Is it a crime that she stays in Kibera and I stay in Borodo, in Zimbabwe? And how do we make those two meet? Or how do we differentiate? Or what exactly is it that we're talking about when we're talking about people power? Are we just talking about grassroots power and action? Are we overgeneralizing? I think that these are some of the things that I'm hoping we can be able to get into as part of the conversation. So the concept itself of giving power to the people or building people's power is a very political conversation. And I think Brima mentioned yesterday that politics is never far away from where we are. This is as political as it gets, especially because power is contested and some people think that it is finite. If I have it, you can't have it. If I have the power, you cannot have the power. But is power really finite? Can it not be shared? Can it not be practiced together? Can I not possess it and you possess it at the same time? I think that these are critical conversations around these very political conversations that allow us to think about how we can begin looking at the changing configurations of power, changing configurations of power dynamics, changing configurations of how ordinary people, grassroots people from social movements and civil society can begin impacting and changing political and social structures. Which brings us to the issue of the people dimension. That is the bigger theme under which this conversation is located. I would like to suggest, as we start the conversation, that perhaps, and in line with one of the colleagues, earlier on Briggs was asking, what is your movement fighting for? And my colleague Rachael shouted, pussy power. I'm hoping that she can be able to define that. We know that cats are very powerful animals. Actually, an entire species of animals have been named after that very small animal that is a cat, lions, tigers and stuff. So is that what we want? I'm hoping that we can be able to define it. Someone else shouted that their movement was pursuing social justice. And I would like to suggest that as we think about how we can strengthen agency and build people power in the context of a conversation around African philanthropy, that perhaps we need to relocate that conversation into I'm hoping that we can be able to relocate this conversation around African philanthropy, giving, the art of giving, as ambassadors of giving, within a social justice frame that leads us to the place that Briggs talked about, African liberation. Now, what does this mean? This means that our conversation needs to be tempered by a variety of factors, and I'll just mention 4, and then we move into the panel conversation. The first one, which has already been discussed and talked about, is recognition. Recognition that the people must be there in the room where things happen. You cannot be making decisions about our development of our community and doing so at the Palm Resort, and as the people are not there and are not part of the conversation. So you need to be able to recognize and include us. And this includes going beyond the usual conversations. And this is not to offend anyone. I used to be a young people. I wear earrings, perhaps I have aspirations of becoming a woman. But we need to move beyond those usual marginalities, just focusing on young people and women as the people that we need to recognize and include in conversations around how we can shift power and change things and achieve social justice, or indeed African liberation. And this conversation, I don't think is out of place. My colleagues from the feminist movement are always talking about intersectionality of issues. And sometimes when we overgeneralize and think that the only people we need to include in conversations are just youth and women, because those are the ones who have been traditionally left behind. There are other categories of people and citizens that we leave on account of not falling neatly into those 2 categories. So the issue of recognition, inclusion and diversity is important, but beyond the usual marginalities. The second thing is representation. That speaks to the issue of having the people affected in the room where things are happening, and the concept that Jerry seems to have been following throughout his life, saying that this does not work because it lacks the voices or the representation of those who are mostly affected by what is going on. The third element is redistribution, and this is important and part of the conversation that we have been having all along. Redistribution of resources, redistribution of power, changing the conversation from a situation where partners and philanthropists, because they carry money, can be able to exercise power over the people, to a conversation around how we can be able to exercise power with the people, how we can be able to share power, how we can be able to balance it out in a more equitable fashion. The last thing is just participation parity. And again, this brings me to the issues around different ways of knowing. There are some people who are treated as more people than others, and I've already made that point, that those of us who live in affluent suburbs are often left out in your conversations. But beyond the joke, we need to ensure that at the end of the day, we are treating different vantage points, different perspectives, different backgrounds, different forms of knowledge, and different ways of knowing equally, as part of the conversation around how we can be able to strengthen agency and build people power. Without that parity of participation, at the end of the day, some ideas are going to be prioritized more than others on account of unfounded grounds. You know, so those who are from the academy would think that because they are the ones who are trained in thinking and researching, that their knowledge is more important than those of us from communities who may lack similar training, but are rich in practice and can be able to tell you that what you are talking about is theoretical, it is academic, it does not work on the ground. But our opinion sometimes is then made less important than that of a doctor or a professor or an expert and stuff like that. So we need to work towards parity in terms of participation. With those brief remarks, I would like to, are they not brief? You know, so if you did not have the advantage, so my clock here says 9 minutes, 51 seconds. If you did not have the advantage of looking at the program prior to that, I've got 10 minutes. I've got 10 minutes. Yeah, no, I had been asked to try to ground the conversation in about 10 minutes and then move to the panel. I think I've stayed within the time that was allocated to me by the organizers. I apologize if I've been too long for the audience. Yeah. Right, without going over the 10 minutes, I would like now to introduce my panel, or at least allow them to introduce themselves, because they have been introduced. Starting with the colleague from Pussy Power, Rachael, who has been identified as being a founder of that particular organization. She identifies as a Pan-African feminist and a grassroots activist. Rachael, can you just, can we start with you, and you can briefly tell us about the work that you are doing? What is Pussy Power about? Try to debunk. There is a mic. Yeah, just tell us a little bit about what this whole Pussy Power thing is about, so that we've got a shared understanding.
Thank you so much. Before I start, I would request we put our titles, whether you are a funder, you are a CEO, aside. We put our biasness aside, and let's have the dialogue that we are here to have. Why Pussy Power? Most of us, even Africans, we come from broken family. We come from monogamous family. We come from polygamous family. We come from single mother. We have friends, brothers, sisters, also come from LGBTQ community. We have sex workers. We have child-aided households. True or false? And that's the diversity of our African families. And that's the diversity that people like myself and the colleagues I work with at Pussy Power, coming from an informal settlement where we live, there's a lot of inequality, where we don't have the luxury of cherry picking which right to defend and not to defend, but having the agency of saying we stand for human rights for all because we understand what discrimination means, we understand what discrimination feels, we understand what inequality looks like and feels like. And that's why we said collectively, we need to come with a slogan first that will create conversation and will disrupt power. Why disrupt power? Most of us women, through our bodily autonomy and integrity, we have gone through a lot of violation. And I know even women in the rooms, here in this room, that either we have gone through being body shamed, being raped, being defiled, being denied opportunities because you can't speak certain jargons of English, being denied access to spaces because you don't look like you deserve to be in those spaces. And that's why we said we have to create something that belongs for us. We have to create the feminism that people say is not African, as we say it's African, and it's everywhere. We have seen women in our community who used to be called stubborn because they stood up for the truth. And those women who are they are current Rachael Mwikalis in Pussy Power. So initially, when also we thought of calling the name Pussy Power, together also with some friends who are also Kenyans and non-Kenyans from Mathare, definitely the root was from Mathare, we were like, this is just a program we want to do within our own organization called Coalition for Grassroots Human Rights Defender. But apparently now Pussy Power is bigger than us. Apparently Pussy Power, we are talking about sexual reproductive health and rights. We are seeing our girls, our friends, dying because of unsafe abortion. Why would a girl in Mathare die of unsafe abortion and a woman, let's say in Kilimani, gets safe abortion? That's injustice. It's a true definition of inequality. Why would it be like most of my friends cannot finish school because they've been defiled, they're having kids, because there's no support of ensuring they have options of continuing with the dreams they have. And through this kind of process, to be fair and to be honest, it has been a painful journey, but a fruitful journey. It has been a test of failure, of trying, experimenting, what looks like also for people like you live in what we call in Kenya, ubabini. So what we shifted the politics was that we have been invited in so many of the middle class spaces. Now we want to invite middle class sisters and friends, allies and supporters to our own space in Mathare. And that's how we usually use the slogan, we are ghetto fabulous. Why ghetto fabulous, why Pussy Power fabulous? Is because most of the time we feel we are doing so much in terms of our own feminist organizing. Our efforts are not seen. But also when you talk about philanthropy, we are giving our time in this space. And that's the thing I would want, even we have this conversation about grassroots feminist organizing and human rights organizing and people power and pussy power, the kind of time we put, emotional time in organizing, emotional time in ensuring that even during COVID, we're the ones who kept community going. We're the ones who are able to provide community with food, because at the same time, you can't tell me, on our own community, we want to talk about human rights and then we are not showing what in lived reality human rights looks like. So we had the first conversation and I want to break it. We're like, let's start fighting for water. Government has told us to wash our hands, but we don't have water. So the first thing, push, shame our government and tell them it's your responsibility, give us water. Water came, we realized we need to wash our hands. We don't have big privilege of places to wash our hands. So we came together with communities and we were able to say, who has a skill that can make hand washing station? So we took the jerry cans and then we made hand washing station that we ended up distributing to communities. We asked ourselves, what next? Because a lot of women in our communities work as casual laborers in Saly, a place called Saly. And then there was a lockdown, so they couldn't go. So we said the privilege of our network, and some of people in this room have been able in supporting, we said let's use our network to ask our friends to donate money, because we're not funded. So we need money to buy food. And to be fair, if there's a time we felt solidarity and we felt people appreciated our work, is during COVID, despite it was really tough. That's the time most of our work came out. Like that's the time even we use our skill in our making soaps, the local soaps, that even other feminist group and some Kenyans like Wangeshi are here who are doing fantastic work. Like a group in Kibra were also able to use this as now as the socioeconomic business supported also by UNFPA editors group. A time like that, Wangeshi and the team and other comrades were able to support us, give women who are being abused during COVID some money. But you could see these are local initiatives that most of the time don't get into donors' proposals. These are initiatives that last year when Trust Africa invited us for social movement solidarity, that's where we met Thulani Maseko. Thulani was killed and assassinated by their government. And through that, we were able to mobilize people in this continent to call accountability for the government of Swaziland, or now the way it's called, and excuse me if I use Eswatini. But through that, we were able to get the government, the Prime Minister of Eswatini saying us were hired crowd and goons that were rented to hold them into account. But you could see through this pussy power from Mathare made the whole continent organize in demanding justice for Thulani Maseko. And all of us were young women. So I'm trying to communicate, there's power in the grassroots. It's not like we don't know our problems. We know our problems, we know a solution. But at the same time, how do we resource us maintaining our own dignity? Because also that there's a problem where you want to resource us, you want to tell us Rachael has been doing this work, and later when you want to resource me, you ask me, where is your degree? Where is your PhD? But solving a people's problem doesn't need PhD, doesn't need degrees. Philanthropy, us as Africa, we are philanthropic in nature. That's the reality. And all of you in this room, as we call it, we all pay also black tax. We have a family and a family who is sick that we need to support. So for me, clarion called in this conversation is also all ourselves to be not buyers in terms of our politics, but stepping back from our own privilege and saying, how best can I support the local-led grassroots initiative? And thank you, Trust Africa, for making it political, even putting the name Pussy Power. Not many people do that. And that's why we need to protect such kind of spaces like this, where you're not forced to change your identity to fit in a certain class, or in a certain club, in a certain movement. Thank you, Evans, for giving that platform last month at EAPN meeting, where we are bringing this conversation, because youth is about innovative. And that's why you'll see even most men who are in Pussy Power and youth is because they feel it's swaggish, it's classes, but it's in terms of, it looks fun, but at the same time, the message goes out. When you wear a Pussy Power t-shirt like this, you don't need to say Pussy Power. Someone sees, the message goes out. So are we together to build a movement that respects, not discriminates, at the same time, not saying this is only ours, but believing in the human right for all? Are we ready to build that in Africa? Are we ready? Yes. Is this a group for people power, Pussy Power? I'm not feeling like you're with me. Am I feeling the solidarity? Pussy Power. Pussy Power. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachael, for that powerful introduction to your work, and for clarifying that Pussy Power is not about cats, that it is about other more fundamental things, and that you are not ashamed to associate with that. As we move on to the next speaker, I want you to reflect on two questions, and I'll come back to you for responses around that. So clearly, the name Pussy Power is very provocative. I was not sure that I would be able to say it. That's why I had to go to cats in order to be comfortable enough to say it myself. I'm just wondering what the response has been from philanthropic orthodox when you introduce yourselves in that way. Does that impact and affect the way that they engage with you, the extent to which they support you and work with you on your journey, is the first question. Then secondly, what is it that philanthropy can be able to do to strengthen your own agency and help you to continue building, not necessarily people power, but Pussy Power in this particular instance? So reflect on those questions. The second person that I would like to give the mic to, I'm very happy. It's just that my smiling game is poor. But a lot of you will never have the opportunity to sit next to a commander, let alone a knight. And I have the pleasure of sitting next to both. My name is Penda Mbow, Professor Penda Mbow, who is the founder of the Citizens Movement, a history professor and teacher by training, who focuses at this particular point on building political and intellectual leadership. I say that I'm sitting next to a knight because amongst the many accolades that have been conferred on her is being the Knight of the French Legion and being commander of the National Order of Merit, amongst many different accolades. I think going through her profile and her history will take forever, so I will not attempt to do that. I will now hand over to her to introduce herself in any way that she likes, and also tell us a bit more around the Citizens Movement and what their own experiences with philanthropy, strengthening agency, and building people power has been. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Modérateur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I'll start by thanking Trust Africa and Ibrahima for inviting me to this important gathering. When we talk about experience, what you were referring to earlier, I am actually a mix of activism on the ground and academia. The studies that I've had the opportunity to do and what I've taught for more than 30 years now are giving me the opportunity to reflect on two things: how to liberate the individuals, give the strength and power to the individuals to not only act but also contribute to the transformation in the right direction of his or her society, and also to be at the service of humanity. My second concern is related to religions. Not religion or faith in its spiritual dimension, its mystical dimension, but religion that is related to social aspects. When we talk about Christianity, for instance, we know that Jesus Christ's model is a model that is rooted in social issues in such a way that the church, wherever it is located in the world, is intervening in health and education amongst other sectors. Islam has something that is the embodiment of the religion, the profound beliefs after believing in God and the Prophet Muhammad, the values. And in those practices, we have the zakat or sadaqah. Sadaqah is a legal way of giving, and it's a way of redistributing wealth in the Islamic community. And these two lines of thought have inspired me. I've read a lot, and I'm very much interested in what the Frankfurt School is doing. And I tend to be a disciple of Anna, and what I see is that what happened in the Western world is that we had an acceleration of history with several forms of revolutions, and I think that we should work at grassroots level, at community level, to liberate individuals, and I'm choosing civil society. Since the 70s, when I was a student, I started being an activist in the civil society, and I created this movement. It would be too long to explain why I created this movement, but I'll come back to that. And recently, I was caught up by two things, and Ibrahim know about it. 2 years ago, we celebrated the 100 years of Professor Amadou Mahtar Mbow, the former Secretary General of UNESCO. And the key takeaways were to have, first and foremost, the foundation, the Amadou Mahtar Mbow Foundation. And this is not what is most interesting to what we did, because this happened during COVID-19. My brother was very sick, and he needed some medicine, but those drugs were coming from France, and France decided not to export those drugs anymore because they needed it. And because we were weaned from such drugs, we couldn't cure and treat my brother, and I had written about it. Should we continue to have pharmacists who would not think of transforming our herbs and plants into traditional medicine? And this is a question that I raised in my publication during COVID-19. Professor Amadou Mahtar Mbow decided to have a foundation on research and innovation, but also on medicinal plants and herbs and how to transform and process them, and realized that during COVID-19 it was impossible to survive if we wouldn't make use of our own resources and have a self-sufficiency when it comes to traditional medicine. Amadou Mahtar Mbow was telling us that until he was 14, he didn't know what it was to take pills or drugs, and he would use herbs and plants locally grown, and he only discovered modern medicine when he was 14 years old. The second fact that was striking to me is the attitude of Sadio Mane, who is an international football player. He was at Bayern München. He had the opportunity to go to Liverpool, but he chose to go to Saudi Arabia. And the explanation was that he was going to Saudi Arabia because he would earn a lot of money, but with this money, because he doesn't need fancy cars and houses, he would build hospitals, schools, and anything that his community would need. And I think this is extremely commendable. And these two examples show how philanthropy This shows how philanthropy has become fundamental to support the society to develop, to strive, and to evolve, especially in this time of crisis of multiple dimensions. Now, in our societies, poverty is felt everywhere. It's predominant, and we cannot continue to overlook the situation, especially when we have the means and resources to give to others, but we are faced with many blockages in our societies that are somehow stopping philanthropy, and I'll elaborate more on this. When I wanted to create the movement, the rationale behind was that because we had too many young people who were found in the streets, in the cities, especially in neighborhoods that have become poor neighborhoods. Even the middle-class neighborhoods had become part of those poor neighborhoods. And these young people would be jobless. So we would see this phenomena, young people losing what they've learned in school. So what was there to do to maintain them to an acceptable level? So that was the first rationale behind this movement. The second reason why I moved on to create this movement was because we had many talibes, street beggars, who are children in the streets, and we created 2 centers. So we would look for the region of origin of these children and transfer them to one of the centers, and I partnered with Osiwa. Osiwa was ready to fund the 2 centers that I wanted to build. Unfortunately, the president at that time, Abdoulaye Wade, didn't want those centers to be created. And Nana Panko can testify that at some point he wanted to close down Osiwa if Osiwa would insist in going ahead with building those centers, because there are political dimensions to it. You have the religious leaders who were behind him combating this idea. And if we had created those centers in modernizing our society, these centers would be models to propose to the society. And he had his own plan of modernizing daras, which are Quranic schools, which is sort of a taboo in Senegalese society. So I made use of those young people who have benefited from studies, higher education to be specific, and we wanted to replicate what we were doing in society. That way, we created centers in the northern part of the country, and we had the Luxembourg Corporation support. But it's not always that you receive support and funding. The actions that I were able to carry out in 2002, because I wanted to be the mayor of Ashlem, the municipality of Ashlem, where I would have a list of actors in the community, but I didn't have money to do so. I had friends who were supporting me in organizing the gatherings and all the activities. And what was interesting in the movement was that I have human resources from the Ashlem municipality to do something. We had the griot who was singing for us, who was relaying the messages, and we had the tailor who would sew the flags, etc. And when I finished with that program in the Ashlem municipality, I didn't know what to do with those young people who were supporting me, and that's what led me to the movement. And because I didn't have funding, I was using my salary to finance this program. I was using my salary to pay for rent, etc. And I didn't have a dime as savings in my bank account. And it is a problem for philanthropy. This is another problem for philanthropy, which means that it's shallow. You live on a day-by-day basis, and you try to make ends meet. But what is important is to do something and believe that you can forge ahead. we meet a lot of obstacles in our communities and societies because those who have money do not understand the real need to get into philanthropy. If I have money, for instance, I'll give it to the griot who will be singing for me. Or instead of putting it in savings accounts, I would use it in family celebrations and ceremonies, etc., which makes us societies that have a medieval mentality. We are trying to show off as much as possible, and whenever we do this act of giving, we want everybody to know about it, which is a handicap for philanthropy. How do we save more, and how do we re-inject such money in the needs of development and supporting our communities? So social stratification is not something that helps. Claude Meyer made an important study on donation and counter-donation or reciprocation. In our societies, we give and we take. But there's a need for us to review this vision of our societies between donating and reciprocating. And unfortunately, this is what is at the basis of the generalization of corruption. To get rid of corruption, we need to interrogate our structures, our societies, in order to see what in our societies are promoting corruption and what would remove this temptation to be corrupted. Corruption is not a problem of ethics in our societies, unfortunately. Now, how do we get rid of it? And that's why I always talk about social revolution. Maybe it's the revolution of the 1989, but I'm very attracted to what is happening now in Senegal, because in 2005, when we launched the study on illegal migration from the countries of origin, what is the profile of the migrant? And I made a comparison. We tried to compare with what was happening in Algeria during the Civil War. And Mimi did an excellent job on the crisis of rent. And we were trying to see what was happening in the households. You would have a retired father and a mother, in other instances that would be a widow. So you would have households that would be fragmented, and it was difficult to survive in those families. So there needed to be some actions carried out. When I started with the setters in 1989, I said the government cannot take care of us anymore because they don't have the resources. So the households should contribute up to 500 francs to the community, and we would use that money to do the cleaning of the streets. And at the end, we didn't need those 500s anymore because all the community was enthusiastic about the project. And in Ashlam, the movement spread, and it even went beyond that municipality, and that's how we started these political actions, because philanthropy should start at that level. It's a philanthropy, it's a political action that would liberate individuals. So that's such examples that help us see the ways and means to liberate individuals, but also negotiate with the public authorities. If between 2000 and 2012 we had 2 changes of regime, it's because the citizens were changing in their mindsets with the meager resources that we had. I'll finish with some recommendations. One of the problems in Senegal is begging. I always call Senegal the capital of begging. We had many people coming from Niger, and at some point the president had to send them back home because most of them were sleeping in the streets. And we also had some Malians who were coming here in Dakar to beg. The reason is that Dakar was the capital of AOF. So there is a historical link between Dakar and the other cities in West Africa. These people are poor, yes, but they have rights, and we need to find solutions, and that's where religion should find those solutions. When the church was leading in Europe, it was at the center of everything. And in the Arab world, the same would go for the mosques. Why not organize the zakat and the waqf and all those lines of donation to organize our structure? Because when those people were sent away, a week after, they came back because they found it easier to beg. They would earn more and be able to do many things. So maybe we shouldn't work on the beggars, but rather on the society. We cannot continue to maintain this mindset that is problematic. What should we do? I think that we should work with the mosques in the neighborhoods and the big mosques to counter the act of begging. Now, for zakat, it's not just about giving something at the end of the Islamic year, but we need to find the resources. Why not a fund? Because we had the zakat house that would contribute extensively, but it's a problem for a country like Senegal and Dakar, to be specific. And I think that it's not just taxation that should be the solution. What the government is doing is interesting. Yes, we need to fight begging in the streets, but it's the society that should change its mindset. And I'll finish with one thing that I keep saying. It has always been a concern for me: schools and education. We cannot have education without the sector being supported by social forces. We cannot have good education if those who have the resources, because I was struck when I went for the first time to the US in Michigan University. I saw these many buildings with several names, and they will tell me that they are named after these buildings because they contributed extensively to support this faculty or that sector. We don't see that here. Apart from the Kebambe Foundation, very few foundations here in our country are being supported by philanthropists. Now, if in your daily lives you are able to support those around you, will you have time to mobilize resources for others who are outside of your circle of relatives? That's the big question today in a country like Senegal.
Yeah, a number of interesting threads beginning to emerge. But one of the interesting questions that has to be part of the conversation is the extent to which one can be a philanthropist if they are poor. Is it possible to be a poor philanthropist? Can you give what you do not have? And I'm raising this because of the idea of local mobilization of resources. And yesterday we got a very good story from Baba Mbow around how societies would come together, not because they had plenty or anything, but because someone was in need and they were giving little by little. But it's an interesting question that I think deserves some answers and some thinking around how we can be able to leverage our resources, local knowledge, infrastructures to ensure that we begin to take responsibility for our own philanthropic actions, and also connect that conversation with yesterday's conversations around religion and philanthropy. Hopefully you can share a few more reflections around that and other issues. I'll move on to my last panelist, Marema Toure. Marema, like me, does not let go of a good photo opportunity. If you go up there, it's like you are giving a keynote. People would think you are the same as Jer. Marema is a sociologist by training. She is the vice president of the scientific committee for CODESRIA and founder of the African Center for Research and and humanities. And that is a research area, that is her interest, and that is what she's been working on amongst many other issues. She also directs the Theory Consulting Group and is former head of the SHS section of UNESCO, Breda. Marema, over to you. What is your work about? What are your reflections on the topic, strengthening agency and building people power to shift narratives around philanthropy and African philanthropy?
Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone. I came to the podium, to the high table, because I am really impressed and I am stressed. And I would like to thank Trust Africa and thank Ibrahima for having brought me here. In Senegal, we usually say that he said what I wanted to say. And since yesterday, all those who have been speaking have said what I wanted to say. And when I listened to Bite, I thought that it was exactly what I was supposed to say. When I listened to Jerry this morning, I said, well, I have nothing to say. But when I hear that young lady from Kenya, and when I listen to Penda, I ask myself, where am I and why am I here? Because since yesterday, what characterizes all the people who have been here, who were here, is that they have some experience to talk about. They have learned something in philanthropy that they want to come and share with all here. And for my part, I am maybe the only person in this room who has not experienced anything or experienced very few things in my past as regards philanthropy. I came because I am a retiree, a young retiree. I just retired from the United Nations, even if I am only 20 years old. I am a teenager. But I have some little savings. I have some little savings because I worked in the International Civil Service for some years. And in terms of monies, it is not really very significant. But I have a serious willingness, a serious urge, because as she said, people need to get out of certain models and frameworks, so I decided that I could invest the little that I have for leadership. Leadership through education and research, because I'm more involved in research and education institutions.
Si je suis là,
and if I'm here today, it is to learn from you, to learn from your advice, and to communicate with people and see what impact I can have with the little money I have. But what is important for me is that when I talk around myself with my family members and I say, well, this little building, this little land that I got, the little savings that I have, I want to invest them to create a foundation for people that I do not necessarily know. Philanthropy is maybe anchored in my family, but they tell me, but why do you want to deprive the people who should have been your legitimate inheritors from the money that you accumulated to give it to people that you do not know? And I think that in Africa, we do know what donation means. We know what donation is. We know about generosity. We certainly know many practices, that can enable us to do good, but it is almost always around ourselves for people that we know. And I think that what we can learn from philanthropy is that we should close our eyes and invest for someone that we do not know. Now, this is a debate that I have today in my own family, with my sisters, with my nephews, male and female, because I do not have any biological child. But I consider that all African children around me are my children, and maybe that is where there should be action. And when I was told that I had to talk here in plenary, I said that where did Ibu put me? And I am sorry that I missed the academic conference, because the questions that I had while simply trying to understand the title of our session, enhance agency and increase the power of people, I thought that I would look strengthening agency and building people power. Now, and so I decided how I would translate it, because it was in English, how I could translate it into French to understand at least a little bit. And when I came this morning, I realized that I missed the tract. But when I listened to Jerry talking about language, jargon, and I thought that maybe the little ideas that I had in mind were part of the debate. Jerry was talking about jargon. Jargon, when we teach it in sociology, we say that it is a form of language that refers to power. Because we make a different distinction between what can be the technical language, which belongs to a discipline or corporation of the jargon, because jargon is esoterical. It is esoteric. It is gives power because it is only for those who have been initiated. They are the only ones who can understand it. But over and beyond that, over and beyond what we call jargon, philanthropy, with the notions on the basis of which we are reflecting today in Africa, puts on the table a question of language and a question of way of talking. Language and way of talking. And I tried to just take the word agentivity to agency, to find out what it means. But in this room, we are colonized by concepts, because we, in fact, are under the pressure of those who colonize us. Some here were colonized by the British. Today, they are stronger in the way they talk, and those who were colonized by the French and who are at the periphery of those who are colonized. And the question that the way of talking poses is how we understand things, how we can disseminate that in the communities who are out of the official language sphere. So if we want to educate Africans, if we want to educate them to philanthropy, maybe we need, first of all, to have the space to be able to say how we understand things in our own languages and how we can convey the relevance of those things to the communities, for the communities to understand them and take ownership of the fact that they can change and that philanthropy can change some and change things. So language is at the basis of identity. Collective and individual identity. It is the privileged mean of accessing knowledge. If our communities, the communities that are already excluded, not only from common talking, not only from technical language, but from the language itself in its essence, how can we reflect in depth on what African philanthropy means? If I take the word agency, in sociology, according to schools, there are different ways of saying an agency. In English, they would say that the agent is the one who has the ability to act and the ability to change things through his action. In French, that is not an agent. It is the subject. And my question is, where are the stakes in all that? Where are the challenges for us? And we should not make a mistake. We should not mistake our battles. And someone said that language is fundamental because it touches the identity of people. African philanthropy must be based on African identities and values. Language relates to culture. It relates to the question of the nation and our ability to change things. There are practices. Ibu was saying yesterday, was recalling that in Wolof, someone tells us, when you give someone, instead of saying thank you, he said that it's for us. It's for us. We share it. Now, what this reminds us of is that we have to refocus African philosophy, basing it on the African values and resources, because all of us here, we believe that in order to really do philanthropy, we need the money from others, and we need the jargon, the words and powers that someone brings in his suitcase. Yet in our villages, I have 1 minute, yet in my village, we do give. We do give. But everywhere in our societies, we do know Ubuntu, left, right, and center. We know Maya. We know here in Senegal that the human individual is the remedy of the human individual. Since I only have 1 minute, let me just say, but I didn't talk for 10 minutes, by the way. I just wanted to say that there is a fundamental resource that we must take into account. This is awareness, consciousness. I think that there is someone who is from Tuba Chakanam in this room. It is a foundation. But a few years back, at the beginning, in 1974, there was a Murid Marabu here, Sering Abdullah Mbake, who had asked the believers to go to Tuba because he wanted to build a mosque. It was during the drought, and everybody was wondering how they were going to get the money to feed their family the next day. But what is impressive is that after 3 days, he went to the television to say, don't bring any more money because I received too much money. And those who had given that money were people who were poor, but they wanted to sell even their last wrapper or brief to go and contribute. And it is that type of contract of confidence, and that, in fact, will only be paying when they die and go to the other world. And if you are ready to give for a contract that will bring you something when you die, it means that it is fundamental. African population must be confident in leaders, because for philanthropy to develop, you do not give your donation, your knowledge to someone that you do not know. This should stop. And that is where I will stop, because he told me that I should stop. But you can see that even the 2 little pages that I had prepared to overcome my fear by sharing with you, I couldn't read it because he stole my time.
Yeah, I am guilty as charged, the thief of time, from the beginning to the end. Thank you so much for that moving introduction to your thoughts and your work. And I would encourage people not to lose heart. I think that this is the beginning, this is an ongoing conversation that started on Monday, and specifically with regards to this particular element of the conversation, that will continue in the parallel session. So if you are interested in hearing about the story of Sadio Mane and how he chose to get more money so that he can contribute, go to the session that's going to be focusing on emerging new actors in philanthropy. Talk to the musicians who are here, who are engaging in philanthropy. Talk to our new philanthropy who's going to use a savings to support people that that she does not know. So it's an ongoing conversation. If you want to continue the conversation around young people and how they're engaging with philanthropy that was started by Rachael, there is a parallel session for that, and so on. So don't lose that. The conversation continues. When I said there was 1 minute left, I had been told that we had 10 minutes left. So I'm not the only one guilty of stealing time. Even the other people presiding over the process are doing the same. I want to just say in 5 minutes, if there are people who have got something specific that they would like to ask the panelists, in addition to some of the questions that have been throwing around, we can quickly get those questions and get them to answer them for you. Are there any questions that you'd like to pose to any of the panelists? Yes, ma'am. Can we have a mic? So that's one. I noticed there's a gentleman over here with a question, right? That's two. Okay, we'll take those two. This way, sir. Yeah.
Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Willie Lowe. My name is Willie Lowe. I represent the Konrad Adenauer Foundation through the Rule of Law program in Sub-Saharan Africa. I really like your presentations, and I thank you for the relevance. And I would like to pay tribute to Mrs. Penda, who is here, who is an example to us as young women, and who is continuing her research. Mrs. Marietu Toure is our colleague from Kenya. What I got out of your presentations, particularly from the intervention on Mrs. Penda Mbow and Mariam Toure, is that they talked about the lack of confidence that exists nowadays of youth through the programs, confidence in the programs that are proposed to them. Mrs. Toure talked in her presentation about the lack of confidence that exists. And what I have noticed, what I have observed, is that nowadays the main problem that we have is that the youth, people are ready to give, but the confidence that motivates that donation and the idea of saying, well, I can give and I'm sure that my money will be invested for things that I can look at, touch on, things that I can use. The example of Tuba Chakadam is a good one. I am Murid. I contribute 1,000 francs every month, but I have no concern about how the money is going to be used because I am quite certain, I'm sure that the money will be used for education, for infrastructure in Tuba, and for other things. And I have full confidence that this money will be properly used. And today, even if with our politicians, the youth, it is the main concern of the youth. The governments invest money, but this money is not seen through infrastructure, through our well-being. And this is the main problem. If we can, in fact, restore that confidence through philanthropy, through strategies that we decide to roll out as part of that philanthropy, we will get a lot of things out of it. We should develop confidence in the donors. We are ready to give, but who are we giving to? How is that money going to be utilized? How can we ensure that there is going to be continuity, efficiency in the use of the money that is being given? And this is, in fact, the problem that we should put on the table. And this can apply to everywhere in Africa.
I'd said we'll just take two questions.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Bonjour.
Good morning. My name is Elat Mbaige. I'm the administrator of the University Cheikh Anta Diop Foundation. I've had the privilege to listen to my former professors, Penda and our sister, and I really appreciated the relevance of what they said. And since we are talking about sharing experience, I would also like to share a number of concerns, because since yesterday we have been talking about communities, but did we ask ourselves questions on what the communities think about philanthropy? This is an inflection point. a reflection point. Very often we speak and we talk on behalf of the communities, but we do not try to see see what their concerns are. Another point is that we also talked about value statements. I've worked for organizations for a long time at national, international levels, and with the assistance of the Ford organization, and I thank Mr. Akwasi. We worked on the promotion of culture in Africa. And recently, in the past 3 years, I've had the opportunity to be the director of the University Sheikh Anta Diop Foundation, whose role is to support the university, because you are aware, certainly, that most of the university resources of the universities come from the government, but very often they do not meet all the needs. And when I try to understand why the foundation did not really work very well, that foundation that we established, I realize that there is a critical issue there. Do we have the culture of philanthropy? I tried to ask questions around me, and people say, well, yes, we want to give, but we don't know, we don't have money to give, because, and this shows the impact of poverty. People want to give, but they do not have the means to do so. In our countries, we have people who are extremely rich, but some prefer to build a big building and have a watchman there instead of giving donations. But at the university level, we thought to invite partners to build using the example of the American model, but it is not really operational. And I would like to talk about the question of confidence and the credibility of the discourse and the language. I was lucky enough to talk about Nami General, who is from, and I told him, you are an alumni of our university. What can you do for your university? He said, well, I would really have liked to do something, but I can't. And so in my absence, but we'll see. So in my absence, he called somebody and talked about the foundation, etc. But the person didn't do anything, which means that question of generosity and culture of generosity and philanthropy can be an issue. But as you said, it is a question of confidence and transparency, because people do want to give, but they should have the certainty that their money will be used for a good cause. And this is an experience that I had, because I launched a scholarship program to support excellence, and I went to meet some personalities, and people are making efforts. And now we have secured this program of scholarships for 2 years, because somewhere, somehow, the discourse was consistent and people were convinced that the money that they're giving will be used for a good cause. So the question of accountability is important. But let us ask ourselves, what do communities think of philanthropy? This is a question that I am putting to all the participants, and I think that we need to address it.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I cannot take any more questions because of time. But two interesting submissions that have been made from the floor, raising not necessarily questions, but number one, the issue around trust. How do we build trust in philanthropy, especially as it relates to social movements, to communities, spaces that ordinarily do not have the kind of infrastructure that NGOs have, that people can be able to point to as accountability mechanisms. I'm able to hear reflections from the panel around that. The second issue that was raised is around credibility of concepts. One of the biggest things that we've been talking about since yesterday is that philanthropy is part of our DNA as Africans. But here is a proposition that perhaps the culture of philanthropy is non-existent, that in us, that is why perhaps we are struggling. How do we reconcile those two perspectives, the culture and practice of Ubuntu, Sadaka, and other things that we have been talking about, and the fact that when we do try to launch big initiatives, the giving is not necessarily there, even though we say that it is part of our DNA. The last thing is just a reflection and separation of issues. How do we separate between, philanthropic orthodoxy, the regular ways in which philanthropy has operated and has been institutionalized over time to meet the challenge of building people power, which was part of this conversation. And that then speaks to the issues of the grassroots. So you were giving examples of what you were trying to do at the university level. We are saying how there is a separate conversation which we can have around that. How do we also bring the conversation around philanthropy to building people power at grassroots level on citizens' initiatives with communities and citizens on board? And it is important. Nothing for communities without communities, nothing for citizens without citizens. But I think that some of the work that has been articulated here begins to show how some of that is beginning. In short, I apologize, just a minute. Any closing reflections on the topic and any quick responses to the questions that have been posed? Yeah. Yeah, the mic had been taken away because we've run out of time.
Okay, I'll try and be quick, but also I'll bring now my activism art. If I don't do that, I know Briggs, you'll be mad. Huh? One of the things that I want to put across is in terms of where I come from, where it's the community, I live in the same community, people are doing philanthropic work. That we can't deny. The kind of activism we are seeing in this continent, even in this country where youth are organizing, they're giving their time, their idea, their knowledge, and even thinking through how to do mass mobilization. For me, that I see it as philanthropic. And we can't take away out of that. The other thing I want to bring out of this discussion is that we can't deny people power in asking government accountability. And when we do that, people see that we are not philanthropic. And I think this is a conversation even funders in this room need to have. And I asked it even last time when we were in Zanzibar. How many philanthropic fund resistance work? And when I mean resistance work is asking public accountability to our government because it's their responsibility. When they fail is when we come together, we support each other, and that's why also there's the role of CSO in supporting, and we can't deny that. Around the youth, I feel we are doing more, but also the funder system is disappointing us. The funders, you expect so much from us. You ask due diligence, you ask a lot of questions. You ask me, like, for example, an audited account, and none of you has ever funded me, example. And then we have people who have been giving philanthropy who don't ask you audited accounts in the community. Because they give 10 shillings, they give 100 shillings. How do we match that audit that is given from community, that they know my money was used to pay school fees, here is the receipt, vis-a-vis that audited account yes for 10 years, and maybe, like for me, I've been acting for more than 10 years. This is the first time I'm getting funding. And everybody thinks you have funding. They ask you audited account. So one of the thinking that we have been able to push even within our Pussy Power Festival is that telling even funders, and I agree with Urgent Action Fund, you can get money with your own condition. Last year, we raised more than 1.6 million Kenyan shillings through people giving. And funders giving, and we tell them we don't want your conditions. And they gave us money. With no audited accounts. It's working. It's working. The year before that, we throw into social media when we were doing the first Pussy Power Festival. We say, let's test. We wrote to email to most of people in this room. People didn't respond. But Kenyans gave us money. We said it's Pussy Power Festival. We want to do Pussy Power. Kenyans, in less than 2 weeks, they gave us more than 300,000 Kenyan shillings. That's $3,000. People are giving. You get it? I'm trying to link. But if you want philanthropy to change, come and understand how you work. Because we are doing the work. You can't tell me we are not doing the work. Fund us on how our system operates, because our system are working. But at the same time, let's have this dialogue on how to improve it. Because we are getting tired. That's why government is co-opting many of us. We are seeing some of you also funding double standards. We are seeing people, now in Kenya, we have the problematic government that is anti-choice, anti-gender. Some of you are funding both sides, two sides of the coin. And when I come to resist, you tell me, Rachael, you're not doing your work. You get it? So let's do diligence in terms of also how you grant. Don't grant homophobic people. You're also creating a war in Africa. Don't fund homophobic people. In Amnesty, we pushed this month.
Sorry, comrade, you
in Amnesty, we pushed this month where we had Sam George from Ghana. And we said, we can't have Sam George and he's good in taxation work, but he's homophobic. We can't bring him. We have seen PLO Lumumba in South Africa. We talked with the comrades in South Africa and he was able to be called out. So let's stop double standard. Philanthropy is about, we are all in the same business of changing life, so we can't finance violence of peoples and queer people and women in the name of, we are Africans, we are religious. African value is not about aid, it's about love and being kindness. Thank you.
Yeah, please proceed.
Alors, Madame Lowe, vous avez confirmé ce que je disais.
You confirmed what I was saying earlier. Behind philanthropy, we have to have a certain type of philosophy, a religious philosophy, a political philosophy, a philosophy about humanitarian. You need some sort of philosophy, and you have shown this through Tubak Chakana. And I realize that with the political life that we know, opposition leaders, each time they need money, people are mobilized very quickly, especially in the diaspora, to find funds in order to finance their political activities. But when it comes to philanthropy, I wonder, how can I make all these people contributing for political activities, to contributing to issues relating to the youth that we need to support, the youth to whom we need to give means, etc. But in our traditional culture, there are elements there. There used to be a field that was a collective field, and each weekend, for example, or one day in the week, you can go and walk on that farmland, which is a collective farmland, and whatever you harvested from that, you can invest in the society, in the youth, play for games, etc., leisure activities. So this sense of community existed before. Why shouldn't we exploit this in another manner in order to achieve results, other types of results, because the society needs more rapid change. In our societies here, we have, especially among women organizations, women with their contributions that they do on a monthly basis, it works very well. You have women who have a lot of means, so who come together and make monthly contributions. Why can't we have these round-robin contributions that women make? Take that money and invest in children's education or in women's entrepreneurship, etc. So you have to give those round-robin contributions and other philosophy, asking those women to go and find and invest in maybe the maternity ward of their neighborhood. So you need another type of philosophy, but women's associations should also take this into account in order to talk to other women. There are many things that we can do. My issue is begging, really, how to eradicate that phenomenon. Should we go through mosques only, or women's organizations? It is true in traditional society, these talibis, they had a woman who was taking care of the Quranic schools. Maybe one woman would take care of the small children who were in these Quranic schools to give them to eat. But the problem is with the teacher in these Quranic schools who needs money every day for their schools to operate. And children and parents who have children, who bear children, and once the children is born, they just give them away to these Quranic school teachers. So how can we ensure that those parents are aware? It's not only a matter of poverty, but there is also the fact that a mother or father should not leave their children just go like that. There are several things that we have to, but we have to deeply look at our societies and how they work. Thank you. Thank you. I think, yes, we need to really look at our societies in a critical manner. When I looked at the documents, we said that the focus should be on the youth, on women. I think it's relevant also is to put the focus on youth in a gerontocratic society and an old society. I think it is important to focus on women in a society that is patriarchal. And in Africa, these two dimensions, this is very important. I believe that this should not prevent us. Earlier on, I was not able to talk about the strengthening agency, that is empowerment. But our societies, especially in West Africa, are hierarchical societies. And because there is hierarchy in our society, there are social groups that are excluded from the production means. I often worked with Trust Africa with people that are of slave descendants that are in our country, in our societies. And when I talk about all of that, I just want to say working in an effective manner in philanthropy is you always need to analyze the situation to understand who is the most marginalized, the most disadvantaged persons in our societies. One thing about trust, the lack of trust, and the existence of not of philanthropy in Africa, I think that what we should continue to do in conceptualize, say, is to find out where is the border between solidarity and philanthropy. Is the concept of philanthropy as it exists in our communities, does this include or does it exclude the concept of solidarity? I think we need to qualify that, because I think a philanthropist is someone who can invest for the benefit of someone they do not know. And I think that in Africa we have a lot to learn. So I would just conclude by saying that talking about the youth, about women, in order to restore the hope of the youth in Africa, because the imperative duty of philanthropy is to ensure that Africans believe in Africa. And when the youth decide to immigrate illegally, dying on their journeys, it is often a community project, because very often is the mother who is behind the woman. And we had to remedy all of this if we want to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much to my panelists. I'm not going to try to summarize the session or even the last interventions, even though I'd love to. I'm not going to do that because we are out of time, but there is food for thought going forward, the issue of accountability and trust. Are we saying that because people are social movements and we don't want restrictions, people must just be given money without some form of accountability because the community is doing that? I think it's something that requires further conversation. The issue of the kind of things that we can be generous with. It's not just treasure. Briggs would say time, treasure, and talent. So what is it that you are being generous with? Is it that if you are generous with treasure, which is money, that you are more important than the one who's being generous with time? Or that one who is being generous with talent. Then lastly, who has the right to define what progressive philanthropy looks like? You know, my sister from Kenya was saying, don't give people who are homophobic money, right? But we know that on the other side of the spectrum, there are people who believe that liberals are also evil, that people are too woke for nothing. And is it okay for someone to then come and say, don't give these people money because they are too woke? Who has the right to define what is the place of ideology and choice in the conversation around philanthropy? Is there a unifying ideology? For instance, what we experienced yesterday around Pan-African feminist giving. That's an ideological frame. And if you want money from that pot, you need to identify in some respects with those tenets. But how do we balance the equation? Because we are all diverse. We've got different things. You come and say, don't give people money who are homophobic. Those who are pushing for religious philanthropy will come and say, no, but the Bible says this, the Quran says that. I think it's an open conversation, and I'm hoping one that we can continue to have. Otherwise, with those few words, I would like you to help me thank my panelists, and I want us to do it wait for instructions, comrades. Thank you. I wanted to say I want us to do it in the stigmata fashion from last night, but I think that this is enough. Thank you so much, and great conversations for the rest of the day. Thank you.
Merci. Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. Merci.
Thank you to our panelists.